I just sat here and filmed a video about 10 Black authors you should know, and the entire clip got corrupted. It is saying on my phone this, which is unable to load video. An error occurred while loading a higher quality of this version. So it shows me that I did it, but it's not at all trying to show me anything. So now I'm on my broken camera and hoping that everything works out and that you can hear me and see me and everything's fine. Okay, so I'm just gonna start all over and just hope for the best, and then that's just how we're gonna have to do it. And then I'm gonna call it a night, because I was like, oh, I'll have time to edit it. I can't. It's already 10:30, and I thought, and I was literally some say check it before you keep talking about these authors, and I got to, which author did I get to? I got to like, this thing keeps breaking, like it just won't hold still at all. Yeah, I only had 3 more authors to talk about, and it completely crashed. I do not know if I can talk as eloquently as I did with the other thing that I did. Like I was really saying good shit. And I felt like I was definitely talking more about the books and the authors in ways that I wanted to talk about stuff before. So we're just going to try it again. There are a couple authors that I think that you should be reading. I think there are so many. If you were thinking like, hey Brie, after reading this or after watching this, you're like, hey, I want to get more authors. That's great. I can do another one later on this year. But I wanted to put these 10 people on here for a reason, because these are usually like 10 people that I go to the most, but it's also like by a hair about the next 10 lists that I have. So first off, we're going to talk about Tananarive Due. I've already done an in-depth guide to reading her books. I mean, it could have been more in-depth, but I started doing that because I want to update it when she writes more books and publish more books. But Tananarive Due to me is an author that I gravitate to always. She can put out a short story and I'm reading it. I just feel like anything that she writes, I need to be a part of it. Tananarive Due to me it's just a big hitter when we look into Black horror. A lot of us who is obsessed with her, read a lot of her things or know her story, call her the queen of Black horror, because she is that. A lot of people are starting to recently know her because of her association with Jordan Peele, but she is that girl in her own right? She has written books with her husband. She has a podcast. She has a lot of things going on for herself. And when you're reading her books, it's not going to be the most easily digestible context, but it's going to be written in a way that really gets you, the reader, to understand that there has been a lot of things that has happened to Black people who have enslaved ancestry in the United States. And for me, as I go through this list and show and tell you things, I might tell you things about the author, I might tell you things about the book. I just want you to hear my words and understand that these 10 authors have literally earned the spot on this list, but just not just on this list. They are just authors who I feel like their stories must be heard, far, near, wide, whatever. And Tananarive Due, my favorite book of her that she has written to date is The Reformatory, because there is a personal connection to her and why she chose to write this book. All of her books, if not most of them, I have given 5 stars to. And with Tananarive Due, what I really love about her writing most of all is just how explorative it is of different facets of Blackness. And I think that we need that. We need to have those stories told. I feel like when she is writing things, she writes it in a way that you understand it, even though the context might be hard, the setting might be hard, the person who is experiencing the real trauma, right, might be hard, but you understand on a historical level of why these things happen to those people and why things continue to happen, especially when we think about the reformatory, when we think about the good house, and I'm looking to the left because I have some notes, and also when we're thinking about the between, like you just know, like, this may be hard, but these are real stories, right? So that's what I appreciate the most about Tananarive Due. I think it's also dope that she has, like I said, the podcast that she has with her husband, how her and her husband take time to talk about different facets of writing. I mean, she's a professor and she talks about writing a lot. How they interview different authors from different backgrounds and how they talk to them, how they affirm them, how they are inquisitive about the genre that we call horror. It's just done so beautifully, and I just truly enjoy Tananarive Due, and I'm so happy that I get to live and breathe with a living legend, and that I get to read her books in real time, and that, you know, when I'm older, I can tell people about, you know, how I felt when this book came out, or, you know, how I felt when I read certain things from her work, because she is phenomenal. And that may be me riffing off, you know, Maya Angelou, phenomenal woman, but she really is a phenomenal woman. So shout out to Tananarive Due. Next, we're going to talk about is an author who I think grit and the way that they write grit needs to be studied, and it is S.A. Cosby. S.A. Cosby, to me, is such a powerhouse. I feel like when you are reading S.A. Cosby, you can't help but to be fully immersed in his story. You can't help to be like, I am rooting for this person, or I'm not rooting for this person, or this person is complex in a way that I want to keep exploring. S.A. Cosby has a beautiful way of writing about things that often has been described in Black community underneath the guise of quiet as it kept. I think he does a really good job on bringing those things to light. In Razorblade Tears, he talks about the grit of Blackness and also community mixed with queerness. You see that just throughout. Sorry for scratching my head, y'all. I had to. It had to be done. He used to be a mortician, I believe, or worked in a funeral home. And he's a big man. He's a dark-skinned Black man. And I think that, like, all of those things and his own personal experience really lead to how he writes his books. You can tell that he has a familiarity with seeing death, with walking alongside death, with just being in conversation where we're talking about death. So I think that his crime fiction and how he just really immerses himself in how he writes his characters, and how just some of his characters, I feel like they are some of the best characters that I ever got the privilege of reading. I think the fathers in Razorblade Tears was so beautiful because you got to walk with them as they challenged things that they felt was against their beliefs. So that was really cool to walk with them and read a book about that. In Blacktop Wasteland, you are in the perspective of a Black man who is trying to get out of the life, who's trying to not be associated with things that were maladaptive, things that really impacted his survival and the survival of his family, and watch him as he get pulled back into that life, but what he does when he get pulled back into that life. All the Sinner Bleeds, you know, follows the story of a broken man who was once a part of a system that, you know, penalized and attacked and still to this day Black and brown people, but also trying to reinvent himself in a new town and figure out what is happening to these people, and also questioning religion in a way that's something, you know, that we don't really do a lot of times in a lot of Black communities throughout America. It's just like, pray it off. God would do it. God. And to see how he challenged that belief in his debut novel, My Darkest Prayer, which I've read recently, that I'm starting to feel might be my favorite of his. But All the Sinner Bleeds, though, that one is just fantastic. So I feel like you can't go wrong with any of the books. He has a new book coming out this year called Kings of Ashes, and I'm excited to see that too. It's not only just what he's writing, it's also the titles of the novels that he chose to write. And I just feel like we need stories like this to be told, because, you know, S.A. Cosby is in his 50s, and it just reminds me of Walter Mosley, who was a black man who wrote crime fiction, and just to see how influenced he is by Walter Mosley, and to also be similar to Walter Mosley in the fact that he started writing or getting published later on in his life. You know, it's really motivating to a lot of writers out there who are like, I'm too old, or I can't do this, and they're literally doing the work and being vulnerable and putting our stories out there. So I appreciate S.A. Cosby and also Walter Mosley for that. Y'all, my camera is so messed up. I'm just gonna record a little bit of it just so you can see that I am not playing around. It is crazy of what's happening. Yeah, that's the camera falling apart. This lens, you gotta like pry it open to use it. Oh, the struggle. So another author we're gonna talk about, and you probably like, Bree, like, why are you adding Kaylnn Bayron? Because there's some books that don't work for you and some that do. I'm gonna support a black woman. 1, 2, Kaylnn, the way that she writes is giving top tier. It's giving top tier. Even though Kaylnn, I think if you're looking for a black author who really leans into the slow burn, she is that author for you. Kaylnn Bayron has been solidified as a favorite of me because I read a couple of her books. So she has a lot of books out. The first book I read from her was Cinderella is Dead, which I think was her debut. And it was a retelling of Cinderella. And I just remember screaming on the internet being like, how could she wait to 274 the page to give us a little bit more, you know, steam in the book? It's a sapphic book. And I joked about it, but I was like, man, she got me hooked, because it's like, even though if you're like me at the time, I was a little irritated with the slow burn, but as I read more books that had slow burn, I'm like, actually, I prefer it this way. So sometimes you don't know what you like until you read much of it and figure out, like, maybe you do like it. I think why I like slow burns is because I don't like a lot of, it's not that I don't like, but I think it's because I also live on the ACE spectrum, so I don't always need to have like physical touch and romance sexually in books. Do I read them on occasion? Yes, but Kaylnn doesn't often does that from the books that I've read of her. Sorry y'all, my camera died. This is one of the things that I just don't like about being a booktuber. It's just like how often you have to like record, and just technology will literally fail you. It will literally fail you, and it will fail you like a domino effect. I've tried to tape the back of my camera, but you've already seen it, and I try to tape it again so that I can see myself a little better, and it just keeps breaking down. It just does not want to stand straight. So that's kind of just where we're at. And I was talking about Kaylnn Bayron, but You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight is my favorite book of hers. I've also read My Dear Henry, which is a retelling of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. But You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight, to me, was just done so well. It was one of the quickest 5 stars I ever gave. This book is, like I said, it's about a slasher. It's about the main character, who is the final girl. It explores her dedication not only to the camp, but to her friends, making sure her friends are okay, her queerness. It just was a lot. And what I found to be like a continued theme and what Kaylnn Bayron writes is just queerness is always present. I really truly enjoyed that. And then what I would say is like a close second, or just like my favorite series of her, would be The Vanquishers. And I don't know if that's the only series she has, but it's the series that I've been reading. Reading this series of how the main character, Boog, and her friends are trying to figure out what happened to their missing friend. and like making this plan to like find them in such like an adolescent way was done really well. Them being able to figure out how they want to say things to their parents, if they will say something to their parents, like the family secrets that is like clearly there, but the adults is not, in a way that I thought was fast enough, informing these kids of that, but also watching the adults realize like these are children, but I should also be honest with these children. So I really love how that was done. So The Vanquishers, I definitely think you should get into it. If you are new and never heard of Blackoween, it is a readathon that I do every October. It focuses on black, horror, spooky, thriller, suspense, all those things, the scary parts of reading fiction. And for the last couple years, I don't know if people have noticed, but I've really been living in Ruby's Crew, which is a part of Tulish Parish, which is like an interactive way to read different genres of spookiness as it pertains to black authors. Ruby Crew really focus on middle grade fiction. I just been reading a lot of middle grade fiction written by black people because they've done a fantastic job, and Kaylnn Bayron is no exception to that. So I definitely think you should read her books if you are interested in anything that I've said about her as well. Another author who I just think is fantastic is James Baldwin. James Baldwin, I've been slowly reading his collection for the last couple years. My favorite book of his is Giovanni's Room. You probably can find a review of me talking about that somewhere on my channel. But Giovanni's Room was so good to me that I still remember how I felt while I was reading that book. I remember just being so infuriated with the audacity of Giovanni and how he treated the main character. Also, the subtle gayness and also more forward in the book was also just a reflection of its time. I think it was written very well. I think there was a lot of themes of like status, sexuality, and positionality that was talked about in this book in a way that had you as a reader just trying to find ways to connect with the man in the character who's just like living in Paris and so happened to have a relationship with this man named Giovanni, and he was Italian and they both were in Paris. Reading this book, it felt like one of my uncles telling me a story about their life, but in such a raw way. And that's why I really liked Giovanni's Room. I also liked James Baldwin's book called The Fire This Time. Let me make sure I'm saying that right. Fire Next Time. I'm saying The Fire This Time. I think The Fire Next Time. This time was another author. And I'm trying to do like a project on that book, The Fire Next Time. And then there's another book. So there's 3 books that I want to analyze and talk about. And hopefully y'all should get that video sometime this year. I was hoping to do it in February, but I don't think I'm gonna have time to do it. It's just such a good book to reflect on, The Fire Next Time. There are some quotes I would like to share with you. One of them is, I imagine one of the reasons people cling to their hates so stubbornly is because they sense once hate is gone, they will be forced to deal with pain. Love takes off the mask that we fear we cannot live without and know we cannot live within. I use the word love here, not merely in the personal sense, but as a state of being or a state of grace, not in the infantile American sense of being made happy, but in the tough and universal sense of quest and daring and growth. I just feel like The Fire Next Time is a book that should be a mandatory read. I think that what really pulled me in this book when I read it many years ago is how tenderly James Baldwin talked about black women, and I really enjoyed the way that he talked about it. I also am rereading it now just to make sure that my thoughts at that time holds up to my thoughts now, because I think that even though I'm always like, I don't want to reread, I think rereading is necessary, especially if you're a person who wants to be a better version of yourself than you was yesterday. And that's what I thrive on. Like, how can I be a better version of Bree? Because it's so easy to fall in line with toxicity and things that don't really serve you, or things that's not really even that important, especially if you're stressed out and your capacity is through the roof. So to me, there's times I'll read something and I'll be like, dang, I connected with that at that time. And then I'll reread it and I'll be like, damn, I was connecting to this, but they clearly left out this group of people. Or I don't know if that sentence, beautifully written, would apply to this or apply to that. I feel that about a lot of my favorite nonfictions over the years. I've been like raving about stuff, nonfictions that I even talked about on my channel. And then I'll go and reread them and be like, I've gotten more education on this subject. So I don't know if I necessarily agree with what I agreed to at some point. So that's why I'm thinking like, me reading Defired next time is really important. I've already read like 15% of the book, so far I feel pretty like this is still spot on, but I still want to finish it to know like how spot on that is for me. Another author that I want to talk about is Erin E. Adams. This is a new author for me. They wrote a book called Jackal in 2022, and I read it twice for two different book clubs, and then I also read it for just myself. So the book club was called The Book Troop by Gabby Reeds, and the other one was the Full Moon Book Club that used to be for the public with Jen Agaton. And I know that it wasn't like a well-received novel, and I feel that a lot of novels that I feel are not well received is really steeped in blackness to a level that you have to understand culture in order to fully understand what the novel is trying to tell you. And it goes back to when I posted a video talking about like Stephen King, horror is not like the standard that you should use to measure all different types of horror depending on identity. So that's just something I wanted to say. So Erin E. Adams wrote a book called Jackal that really focused on shining light in a mixed media way on the thousands of black girls that go missing in the United States every year. And I think them choosing to title it Jackal and to have like this trickster character in the book was done really well. The interviews down to conversations, down to transcripts, like there were just so many things in the book and how it was written that I felt that I resonated with very, very well. Which makes me really excited to see their new book that's coming out, which is called One of You. I don't know when it's coming out, but it says it's coming out in 2025 in April. So I can't wait to read that. And it's about a mysterious outsider who torments two Haitian American sisters, forcing them to confront dark secrets from their family past. And it's a psychological suspense type of novel. And I think that's dope. I think it will be good. I think it will be good because Erin E. Adams is Haitian. So I think writing from your point of view makes the novel that I'm going to read just more powerful. Like I was talking about with Tananarive Due and the Reformatory, so powerful. S.A. Cosby's first novel, very powerful. So I think that writing from things that you understand, that you know, is very powerful. I hope that in the future, just going back to S.A. Cosby, that he writes more stories similar to his debut novel. The next book I'm going to talk about, which is the author of my favorite book of all time, and it's called The Invisible Man. So Ralph Ellison is a black author who wrote a lot of stories that really surrounded social and political things that was happening at the time. And The Invisible Man follows the story of this man who we don't know his race, we don't know his age really. I don't know if we know his age. There's a lot of things we don't know about him. You're watching him explore different like social and political avenues as he journeyed from the South to Harlem. And I think to me what made that just more impactful for me, because I think about like the Great Migration. I think about how, you know, like there's differences like even among like family members and like communities of what blackness is, but there is a difference when you are Northern Black and when you are Southern Black, East Coast Black. Like there's different cultural things that happen. So watching him go through those things and to read it in a way that is just like, I just felt reading this book, I was challenged at every turn. I was trying to think like, how would I have felt if I went to that rally? How would I have felt if I was put in a compromised position with a friend and his wife? Or it's just like, there was just certain different things, and I believe it was a friend and a wife. There were just certain things in the book that I felt like was so contradictory, but also very real on like how many people are trying to exist in the world, like trying to find your space. And people are telling you you belong here, but you're like, do I belong there? I should go check out something else. So reading this book, I felt like it was really good for it to be an invisible man and for the reader to kind of challenge what they think this man is, how old they think this man is, the race of this man, the sexual orientation of this man, just so many things that are being challenged while reading this book. Another author I want to shine light on is Nnedi Akorafor. I read their Binti trilogy a while back, and I think that is due for another reread. To me, the Binti trilogy really follows this young woman who got accepted to this school. She's also kind of like an outlier in her community, and there's something about her that makes her different. So her being like, I'm gonna go explore and figure this out, but also learning that there's a whole, sorry, the camera dropped again, so I don't even know where I meant, but just watching her explore different things with friends. I think what I found, what I can remember, because it's been years to know specifics, but I do remember reading her kind of try to figure out if the adults in this school was worth trusting. And I think that when we talk about trust in adults and from a child's point of view, I think that a lot of authors do that in a way that is very receptive, and also allowing children to understand that, you know, there is danger to strangers. Like, that is a real thing. And like, you know, be careful of the adults that you know, gravitate to, and interrogate what that means. So I just really liked the way how fantastical the story was. I remember reading it and thinking to myself like, wow, like I felt like if I read this in middle school, it would have been more impactful than the more white driven fantasy that I read when I was younger. So I felt like this was good. Nnedi Akorafor really focus on African futurism. She actually coined a term in addition to her having a PhD. Like she's just a very smart woman who really knows how to tell a story, and you can feel that the stories that she writes is heavily imbued in her own African teachings and her own African culture. And I believe she's Nigerian, but let me check that. She is Nigerian American. And like, again, when you write from your own point of view, the story is powerful. And I think that her carving out her own realm in the science fiction like world is done really well. But I will say she's a very interesting Twitter if you're trying to like get to know her a bit better. And she also post online about her cats, so I think that would be cool if you want to see that. If cats your thing, cats not my thing, because they ass be everywhere. Their ass is, if they sit their ass, no. But if that's for you, hey, that's for you. But I also want you to know, when you're talking about Nnedi Akorafor, just make sure that you are also being like African futurism, because a lot of people be like Afrofuturism, and they are not the same. And I learned that through very lengthy, you know, tweets of her being like, don't come for me kind of thing. So that's what I have to say about Nnedi Akorafor. And I keep saying Akorafora because I think that's just the black part of me want to add shit to people's names, but it's Nnedi Akorafor. The next author we're going to talk about is an author that I am like trying to get more into her work. It's lengthy. I don't think that it's something that I can even finish in a year, but I am working on it. A lot of you may not know that one of my favorite genres is historical fiction. A lot of times we talk about in the booktube space of how there is a difference of what you read when you were just a watcher of booktube, or when you were just like not on the bookish spaces on the internet, to when you come into. And I've noticed that I have stopped reading less historical fiction than I did before. So this next author we're going to talk about is when the perfect marriage of historical fiction and romance come. I know, you're like, romance, Brie? I know I don't read a lot of romance. However, with Beverly Jenkins, that is where that goes out the window, because like I said, of Tananarive Due being the queen of horror, a lot of people who are fans of black romance know Beverly Jenkins. They've read her. She's prolific, and she writes a lot about historical fiction with romance. And I read a story, sorry, the camera kind of like went out again, but I am looking for the story that I read from Beverly Jenkins. So one second. Beverly Jenkins is 74 years old and still giving us what we need. That, anyway, sorry, I'm just like, yes, absolutely, keep that pen hot. So there is a series called Destiny's Trilogy. I've read all 3 of them. I highly recommend. I mean, like yesterday, you should go ahead and get those books. These books is about these 3 brothers who is like, nah, I'm a playboy, I don't need all of that, I'm good in these streets, I'm doing whatever I want to do, my parents got shmoney, and I'm gonna go ahead and just plop my seed around and just go ahead and live life the way life's supposed to be led. And then they so happen in each book to fall upon a woman who is like, say what now? You better get right before I get you right. They're not falling for the charms. I mean, there's, you know, it's a love story, so eventually we'll get there, but initially they say, who you and what you doing here, and who do you think you are talking to me like you talking to me kind of energy. So I really like that. I love a strong female character. We've talked about that at length already, but just the way that all 3 of these books are written, I thought it was done really, really well. It's not often that I read historical fiction and there are like dark-skinned characters, and those characters I feel like seen in it. I just feel like we all want to read something that we can relate to, and I think that for historical fiction and romance, unless there's other authors, and I know it is, that I'm not thinking about, I think I'm just going to chill in Beverly Jenkins' catalog and just work that out. There's also a book that she wrote called Indigo that I really want to read. I remember when it came out and how, like, you know, Black romance world was like, oh my god. It was like a reprint of it or something that happened a couple years ago. People loved it. So Indigo, I do want to read that. And then there's a book called To Catch a Raven that I want to read as well. So I have a lot to catch up to, and I'm okay with that, because let me see how many books she has written. Okay, I can't find, you know, how many books she's written, but it's a lot here. And like I said, for Indigo, I just want to make sure I was talking about the reprint of that book, not the book. Like, I'm like, it just came out in 1996, but there was like a reprint special version or something of the book, and I remember people being excited about that. But she's been writing for 30 years and she's still at it. So I do see that there is a newsletter on her website, and I will be taking some time in this video to go right ahead and add myself to that. Okay, I went ahead and added myself. Now moving on to this beautiful list, we have Toni Morrison. Can we get a clap for Toni Morrison? Actually, can we get a clap for everyone thus far? Yes. Toni Morrison is a person that I feel like if you don't already know her, I need you to start yesterday, last year, last month, last minute. Because Toni Morrison is just like all of the authors that I've mentioned. These authors are authors who I gravitate to because I know for sure they're not writing at all for the white gaze. It's either you get it or you don't. I think a lot of times in publishing and in the world of writing, and I'm not a writer or a publisher, but these are just trends that I have really observed, that books do well when it is wrapped in a pretty bow and easily digestible and allow 100% of escapism in the way would not cast light on capitalism and racism and white supremacy. And to me, there are Black authors who write so that it is digestible for everyone who's not Black. But then I feel like they are already writing those stories. They're already putting those stories out in the world. These stories are already what you see right when you go into Barnes Nobles or a bookstore, independent or not. So to me, it's a different task when you are writing for your people. And I feel like all the authors that I'm mentioning today, they write in a way that it's like, you know, these are real things. These are real things that's happening to folks, and they challenge you. And I think a lot of times people don't like to be challenged in their books. They don't want to read in critical ways. And I too, you know, there's sometimes that I'll be like, oh, like, for example, The Reformatory by Tananarive Due. It took me a long time to finish that book. 5 stars. But it took me a long time to finish because I constantly was challenged by her to just sit in a sentence or a scene or a chapter. And I think a lot of times that can be really hard. And I can imagine that being hard if you are a person who have identities that ties with the disenfranchisement of a group of people. Being like, I don't want to read that. I can't relate to that. That's going to make me think about too many things. But I feel like what's done in the dark will come to the light. I also feel like with knowledge becomes power and understanding and empathy. And if you can't read a book because you can't relate to it, then that energy needs to be for everything. I see a lot of us reading books about dragons. I see a lot of us reading books about dinosaurs, and I'm reading recently that we don't really know what dinosaurs look like. We're just out here hypothesizing in a way, and I can fact check me if I'm lying on that, but I just feel like books gives us insight to stories that are often told, stories that we need to remind ourselves of the tragedy so we don't repeat it. And I feel like a lot of time in world, society, we are just in a repeating stage right now. It kind of feels like we haven't learned anything. And Toni Morrison is not that author who's not going to bring the trauma right to you. She's not an author who's not going to tell you, hey, this is colorism and this is how it shows up, and this is how it affects dark-skinned girls, like she did. I mean, she did multiple things, but that's what she did in The Bluest Eye. Like, you have different stories that she has told, and I myself one day want to say I've read all of hers, but I myself have to take just breaks into reading her and Bell Hooks, which I'm mad that I didn't put on this list, but I'll put it as an honorary right now. Bell Hooks is phenomenally, I feel like, when you want to think about love and how children are being treated in our society and just like humility, just so many things. Bell Hooks, R.I.P. And I'm so happy that I was alive when she was alive and I knew her when she was alive. I often get sad about the next person that I'm going to talk about, which is Octavia E. Butler, of how I was not alive. I mean, I was alive. Let me make sure. I was alive when she was writing books. However, I wasn't reading her books when she was alive. And there's so many questions I have for her when I think about her. I think it's called the Patternist series. The first book in that series, I've only read up to book 3 because, like Toni Morrison, Octavia E. Butler is a author that I like to take my time with. But Wild Seed follows the story of these spiritual beings. One named Anyanwu and the other one named is Doro. And I did a book review about this book with another booktuber years ago. Years ago. And there's so many facets about this book that sits with me. Found family, identity, your place in the world, transformation, literally, figuratively, all the different ways that you can think of transformation. People with predator-like behavior, what does that look like? People using information and other human beings against you in such a way. When I read Wild Seed, I was like, this is freaking phenomenal, because how did her brain say, yeah, like all of this makes sense? And then to read of how like other people are coming into this community and how they're getting there. Just Doro as a character and how he's everywhere and nowhere. You kind of feel like in another alternative like universe, he would fit in Game of Thrones, of those people in that area where Arya Stark had to say a girl has no name, right? So it's just like reading this book, I just found myself being like, what the fuck? And then in the second book, I was like, sometimes it is really hard for a lot of authors, especially I would say more newer authors, to keep you fully engaged in the story from book 1, 2, 3, 4, however long the series is. I find myself ending series a lot because I'm bored. I paused this series because of the context. There was no way for you to be bored in anything that Octavia E. Butler writes. I remember reading Kindred and being like, you to write this story as a Black woman had to be you going to the very deeps of who you are and understanding how black you are, understanding how the white man views you in such a dismissal, inhuman way. So reading Kindred really put me in a mindset of, if I was Dana, could I have done what she's done? Could I have put myself in positions of unimaginable pain? But one of the reasons was to make sure my line still lives on. And there were so many times that I was like, fuck them descendants. You know what I mean? Like, I just was like, I don't get how Dana can do this. And you know, when she would go back in time and having to raise that little boy, and you're watching her get older, you're watching her keep being pulled in different realities, you're watching this child grow up and be so hateful and malicious and venomous in the way that he spoke to her. It just really was a good representation of racism is taught. It is a good representation of that. And as a Black woman reading that and knowing that as Black women we hold life, and understanding how crucial her position was in going back and forth in the time manipulation that was happening, it was just such a gut-wrenching book to read that still sits with me to this day. So many things sit with me to this day. And then to read Power of the Sower that I read last month, or maybe the beginning of this month, I can't remember, everything's blending, and being like, is this motherfucker Nostradamus? Like, Octavia Butler is dead. She died in 2006. And almost 20 years later, Octavia E. Butler book, Parable of the Sower, is giving us a play-by-play of the Trump administration. So you find yourself being like, make America great again. Like, you find yourself reading a book doing a Trump presidency election and being just so triggered, like not feeling like there is an escape. But I kept reading because everyone raves about this book, and I've owned this book for years, and I was like, oh, I'll read it when I can. Oh, I'll read it when I can. And then my best friend convinced me to read it sooner, and just, it's one of those books that I needed to read but wish I haven't. I hate that I needed to read that in order to further be validated in how I feel about what is happening underneath the Trump presidency while also living in America. So just very books that pull to your heartstrings for sure. Octavia E. Butler is a must read. Toni Morrison is a must read. Beverly Jenkins is a must read. Nnedi Akorafor is a must read. Ellison is a must read. Erin E. must read. James Baldwin must read. Kaylnn Bayron must read. S.A. Cosby must read. Tananarive Due must read. These are authors who are putting their lives on the line to tell you about the reality of the world. I'm so thankful, and I don't know why I'm getting emotional, but I'm so thankful that I was able to read their books. I'm so thankful that I was able to be a recipient of their stories. So in the comments, let me know if you read from any of these authors, any of the authors you want to read from. Let me know what's been your favorite books, and just put any black emojis in the comment section if you just watch to observe. And I will talk to you on another video. Bye.